That night was different from any other. I was doing the dishes, enjoying the rare tranquility when my husband stepped out, and I felt a warm breath right behind me. I didn't hear the door open or footsteps, just his presence there, so close. My husband's friend. He didn't speak or touch me, yet I felt him there. The silence lingered, and then he whispered, "You felt it too, right?" I should have left, but I stayed still, and that was when everything changed. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small Brooklyn house with my husband, Daniel. The kitchen was bathed in soft light from the pendant above the sink, the sound of running water filling the space as I dipped my hands into the warm soapy water. The sensation of comfort spread through my fingers. It was unusually quiet that night, a rare peace I seldom experience. Daniel had just left, saying he was going to grab a few things for breakfast tomorrow at the grocery store on Atlantic Avenue. I didn't ask for details, simply nodded and kept washing the dishes. I enjoyed these moments. When the house was mine alone. No TV noise, no endless chatter. Just peaceful quiet and the steady hum of the water. I sighed in relief, letting the warmth from the water seep into my skin, easing the aches from the day. My actions became automatic, almost meditative. Pick up a plate, scrub it clean, rinse it, place it on the rack, and repeat. Outside, the streetlights cast a soft glow over the wet pavement, creating pale yellow streaks across the window. From a distance, the sound of honking horns echoed, a reminder that the city never truly rested. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, savoring the stillness before Daniel's return, before life continued. But then, just as I thought I was entirely alone, a sudden chill ran down my spine. I hadn't heard the door open, but something made me freeze. It was an inexplicable sensation of a presence right behind me. My body stiffened. Instinct told me someone was standing there, just behind me. My breath caught as a familiar scent filled my senses. The faint smell of sandalwood and tobacco. Without turning, I knew who it was. Lucas Hale, Daniel's best friend from college. I tightened my grip on the wet plate in my hand, trying to stay calm. Reason told me I was probably overreacting, that Lucas had simply stopped by, maybe to say hello. But if that was true, why didn't I hear him? Why was he standing so close that I could feel his body's warmth against my back? I forced myself to take a deep breath and, keeping my voice steady, I asked, "What are you doing here, Lucas?" I heard a soft chuckle near my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. "Just wanted to look at you." His vague answer only deepened the unease in me. I continued washing the dishes, trying to act as if I wasn't aware of his every breath, every movement. But the silence between us grew thick, like an invisible cord tightening the space between us. I could feel his gaze, even though I didn't look directly at him, like a sharp blade scraping across my skin. "You're quiet for someone who just walked in," I said, my voice strained. "I didn't want to bother you," he replied, his words dripping with hidden sarcasm. I bit my lip, gripping the sink. The water still flowed, but I no longer felt its warmth. Lucas shifted, a small movement that was enough to let me know he had closed the distance between us. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch his image in my peripheral vision. The kitchen light cast sharp shadows across his face, and his dark eyes met mine, unreadable. A slow smirk appeared at the corners of his mouth, as if he knew something I didn't. A knot twisted in my stomach, I clenched my fists. I didn't like this. Didn't like the way Lucas was looking at me. Didn't like how close he was. Didn't like the heavy air that surrounded us. I cleared my throat, attempting to steady my breathing. "Where's my husband?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite the tension. Lucas shrugged, still wearing that unsettling smile. "Out," he said, then paused, tilting his head slightly. "Thought you might need someone to be with." The words themselves weren't what made my stomach tighten, but the way he said them. Like he knew exactly what effect they would have on me, as if he were testing me. I swallowed hard, trying to stay composed. "I don't need anyone. I'm just washing dishes." My voice came out a little firmer than I intended. Lucas leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, his eyes never leaving mine. "Do you always work this hard?" I forced a smile, trying to keep the conversation light. "Someone has to clean up after dinner." Lucas didn't smile. Instead, his gaze lingered on my face, studying me as though assessing something. "I don't think Daniel appreciates you enough." I froze, turning fully to face him, meeting his eyes. He didn't respond immediately, but stared deeply, almost as if searching for something within me. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, sharper beneath the surface. "He leaves you alone too much." The air in the kitchen felt suffocating. I tightened my grip on the sink, doing my best to maintain normal breathing. A boundary had been crossed, a fragile line that had just been pushed too far. I could feel it in the air, and I knew Lucas could feel it too. I turned back to the sink, trying to ignore the tension rising in my chest. The water still flowed, a steady hum, reminding me I was simply in my own kitchen, doing something normal, just washing dishes. But I couldn't ignore how wrong everything felt. His presence loomed too close behind me, though he wasn't touching me. The warmth of his body seeped through my shirt, invisible but impossible to ignore. My jaw clenched. Part of me wanted to turn around and tell him to leave, but another part, the darker part, warned me not to move. If I turned and looked at him, I'd have to face something I wasn't sure I wanted to confront. After a long pause, I finally heard Lucas speak again. "You should stop." His voice was low, deliberate, as though each word had been carefully selected to weigh heavily between us. I froze. "Stop what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Though I could hear the crack in it, Lucas didn't answer right away. I could feel his eyes on the back of my neck, contemplating something. Then he took a step back. The sudden distance, a sharp contrast to the tension that had built between us. "Okay," he said, his tone unreadable. "See you later." I exhaled, realizing only then that I had been holding my breath the entire time. His footsteps echoed through the quiet house, and moments later, the front door clicked shut. He was gone. I stood there, staring at the water flowing into the sink, trying to steady my breath. But no matter how hard I tried, the sensation of his presence lingered. Deep down, I knew that this wouldn't be the last time I'd feel him behind me. My fists clenched, and an odd emotion filled my chest. It wasn't fear, but it certainly wasn't comfort either. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps again, slow and careful, coming back. I spun around, my heart racing. Part of me hoped it was Daniel. Perhaps he'd forgotten something and had returned to get it. But no, it was Lucas. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette casting a shadow across the floor. His eyes never left mine. unwavering, no hesitation, no regrets. I swallowed hard. Why are you still here, Lucas? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked in, slamming the door behind him with a deliberate force. I flinched at the sound. Lucas tilted his head, his eyes dark, his voice light but with an edge. You forgot something. The kitchen suddenly felt suffocating. Too small, too closed in. I knew I should run, but my feet wouldn't move. You should go, I said, my voice sharper than before, though I wasn't sure if it was strong enough to make him leave. A slow, knowing smile spread across his lips, one that wasn't friendly, but lazy and calculating. You feel it too, don't you, Emma? He said. I took a breath, feeling the space between us completely disappear. Lucas moved closer, just enough that there was barely a breath separating us. He trusts you, he whispered, his warm breath brushing my cheek. Maybe too much. I gripped the edge of the counter, my control slipping. The air between us thickened, heavy as an unspoken secret. I felt his hand graze my arm, just the lightest touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity down my spine. I should have pushed him away. I should have said something, but instead I stayed still, my lips just out of reach of his. And then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway brought me back to reality like a bucket of cold water. I froze. So did Lucas. We both realized how close we had come to something. I pushed him away, my breath coming in quick, sharp gasps. Go! Now! Lucas stood there for a long moment, his eyes dark. But he didn't protest. He backed away, casting one last look at me before he slipped out the back door. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my chest, trying to calm my erratic heartbeat. A few seconds later, the front door opened and Daniel walked in, oblivious to what had just happened. Baby, I got everything we need. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to turn around, hiding the storm inside me. Daniel set the bags on the counter, wrapped his arms around my waist, and pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. Are you okay? You look a little flushed. I swallowed and nodded quickly. Yeah, it's probably just the steam. Daniel laughed lightly. I told you not to overwork yourself. I tried to laugh along, but as I helped him unpack, I could still feel the ghost of Lucas's touch lingering on my skin. I should have felt relief, but I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I tried to control my breathing as I helped Daniel unpack the groceries, but my heart raced faster than usual. Every time my hands brushed against the cold cardboard box or the smooth surface of a milk bottle, I flinched, as if they could shatter the fragile barrier I was trying to keep intact. Daniel didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. He chuckled about something. Maybe the new neighbors or some random story he heard on the radio. I nodded and laughed at the right moments, but my mind couldn't let go of what had just happened. Lucas, his silence, his presence, the way he stood so close, the way his eyes locked onto mine, as if he knew what I'd do before I did. And worst of all, the way my body had betrayed me. Nothing had truly happened. Not really. I had pushed him away, told him to leave. But what if Daniel hadn't returned just then? What if I hadn't had a reason to stop? That thought twisted in my stomach. I didn't want to think about it, but it stuck with me, seeping into my thoughts like an indelible stain. Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Are you sure you're okay? I stiffened for a moment, before forcing myself to relax into his arms. "Yeah, just tired." Daniel kissed my neck softly, before turning back to put the groceries in the fridge. I stood there, watching him, as he neatly arranged everything, completely unaware. He trusted me. He trusted Lucas. I bit my lip, guilt rising like a tidal wave. I hadn't done anything wrong, had I? But would that still be true if a small part of me hadn't wanted Lucas to leave right then? I couldn't answer. In the days that followed, I tried to forget it all. I pretended nothing had happened. Like the touch on my wrist had been an illusion. Like Lucas's breath by my lips hadn't made me realize the danger of it all. But I couldn't. The way I felt his presence before I even saw him. The way he always seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. None of it would let me forget. And Lucas wouldn't let me forget either. He wouldn't. Every time I went to the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Every time I passed the coffee shop near my house, I felt someone watching me from across the street. And one night, as I stood in the kitchen pouring water, I felt it before I saw him. My heart sank. I knew where he was. I looked up and saw Lucas standing just outside the kitchen window, bathed in the faint light from the streetlights. His face was barely visible, but his eyes were sharp, and the corners of his mouth curled up just enough to show he knew exactly what I was feeling in that moment.